This is my third video about cellular respiration. This video is going to talk about stage 2 of cellular respiration, which is the Kreb cycle. The Kreb cycle, we always capitalize the K there because it is actually the last name of one of the individuals responsible for our understanding of the cycle. It is also sometimes called the citric acid cycle. We'll talk about why that is in just a bit. Before the cycle actually starts, there's a little step right beforehand. So I'm going to draw our pyruvate molecule, which is 3 carbons. And I think I forgot to mention in the first video that pyruvate is also sometimes called pyruvic acid. Let me put okay. So you might see it as pyruvic acid. So we'll just talk about one pyruvate going through the cycle. You do have to know that the entire cycle takes place 2 times because there are 2 pyruvates made in glycolysis. The other thing that you need to know is that all of these reactions take place in the mitochondrial matrix. Again, an awesome name for a place in the mitochondria. So before the cycle actually starts, there's a little step here at the beginning. It's merely a set of reactions that sort of are a link between glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. We're not going to talk about naming it or anything like that. All that you need to know is that pyruvate ends up turning into something called acetyl-CoA. And in the process of becoming acetyl-CoA, a couple of things take place. First of all, we actually form some NADH. So that means we've taken some high energy electrons and attach them to our electron carrier NADH. The other thing that happens is that we actually form some carbon dioxide here. And we form 1 carbon dioxide for every pyruvate that actually goes through. And so you'll notice if I start with 3 carbon, but then I subtract 1 carbon in the form of carbon dioxide, you should then be able to predict acetyl-CoA is a 2-carbon molecule. So that's our little bit of linkage into the cycle. And now here begins the cycle. And notice the cycle will go around in a circle. And so I'm actually going to start discussing the sort of end product of the cycle that attaches to acetyl-CoA. The end product of the cycle is something called oxaloacetate. You do not need to know the name of that, but just recognize that it is a 4-carbon molecule. Okay, so when oxaloacetate combines, a 4-carbon molecule combines with a 2-carbon acetyl-CoA, we would get a total of 6 carbons. And so the first thing that is formed, and somehow all of my circles are getting very oddly shaped and small, but we'll make do. The first thing that is formed is citric acid, a 6-carbon molecule. Okay, I'm actually going to just erase really quickly and rewrite citric acid again because that looks pretty bad. Okay, yes, the first thing that's formed is citric acid. And so I mentioned earlier that we would talk about why the Krebs cycle is sometimes called the citric acid cycle, and so now you know. It is because the first main product formed in the cycle is citric acid. We're not going to talk about a lot of what happens in the rest of the cycle. Whole bunch of chemical reactions happen. I just want you to realize the general goings on of what happens. We end up creating 2 carbon dioxide molecules. That makes sense because we start with a 6 carbon molecule. We know we end the cycle with a 4 carbon. That means we lose 2 carbons. Each carbon dioxide molecule has 1 carbon, and we lose 2 of those. So that's where our 2 carbons go, okay? We also create some more NADH, and I'm just letting you know the order that I'm writing these on the cycle is not necessarily the order in which they happen. So we make NADH from NAD+, so that's more high energy electrons. So if you haven't already, you'll notice that these high energy electrons are yet to play a role. What do we need these high energy electrons for? So we have that electron carrier. We also create something called, let me put it over here, FADH2. FADH2 is also an electron carrier. It carries 2 electrons and 2 hydrogens as opposed to the 2 and 1 hydrogen that NADH carries. The starting molecule is FAD, not FAD+. You do not need to know the quantities of those. We also end up making some ATP. I believe we end up making exactly, because we're counting here, 1 ATP in the cycle from an ADP. Okay? So notice that there is sort of a beginning and an end to the cycle, and a lot of things go on, but notice that the citric, not all of the carbons that we have are totally gotten rid of in the cycle. Only ultimately a couple of carbons are gotten rid of because you need carbons at the end of the cycle to start over again. That's sort of part of the cycle. But again, let's remember that we go through this cycle 2 times. We go through this whole slide 2 times, okay? So if I quarantine off a little section over here, we need to know that we make 3 carbon dioxide for 1 turn of the cycle, which means for 2 turns, we make 6 carbon dioxide. And if you look back at the video where we talked about our cellular respiration equation, that is the total amount of carbon dioxide that we make, okay? So we're done making carbon dioxide after the Kreb cycle. We have made, and we're just counting ATP here, 2 ATP for 2 turns, because we make 1 ATP in 1 turn. We're not counting the NADH and FADH2, but you do need to know that they exist.